Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Stevie Wonder. We're going to be talking about his magnificent album, INNERVISIONS. Now, I know some of you may be asking yourselves, hey, wait a minute, I thought that this was a classic rock channel. And you'd be right. For the vast majority of my videos, that's what I cover. But tonight, I'm still covering classic rock as far as I'm concerned, and we'll be getting into that because I consider INNERVISIONS by Stevie Wonder a classic rock album, but even more than that, all right? And then we're gonna take a look at this album with some fresh ears. Does this wonderful album that came out and sounded so magnificently refreshing on August 3rd, 1973, sound just as sizzling as it did 50 years ago? The album turned 50 years old on August 3rd, folks, and we're going to be talking about it in this video tonight. Now, it's generally recognized that this was the album that everybody came to, be introduced to Stevie Wonder rather than Little Stevie Wonder. And there is some truth to that, but he had actually already had started using just his name, Stevie Wonder, prior to this album. But because this album was so damned popular with all kinds of audiences, everybody across the board seemed to get something from this album. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, up until this album, Stevie Wonder was getting very frustrated with Motown. Now, Motown had been very key to his earlier successes, but what was happening now was he was writing the songs, and then he'd have to turn those songs over to the producer who got an arranger, who then wrote out how the song would sound. They would record that and have Stevie come in and sing the lyrics over a lot of that material. He would occasionally be on instruments and things like that, but for the most part, Stevie didn't have a whole lot of control with the sound. And part of his problem is that he was thinking to himself, these are not the songs I'm hearing in my head. But when it came time to record INNERVISIONS, Stevie had a clear idea of where he wanted to go, and he was quite insistent on that happening. First of all, on 7 of these cuts, it's all Stevie. Holy shades of Paul McCartney and the McCartney album. What better way to get the sound that's in your head? A bold step for Stevie. But it didn't stop there. He also had access to a monster named Tonto. Now, what in the hell is a Tonto? Well, Tonto is a room-sized musical instrument, analog, put together by a Frankenstein of synthesizers and additional circuitry that could be achieved only in that room. This room had monster playback speakers in it, folks, and it's only one of 2 instruments known to man where you have to enter into the instrument in order to play it. Want proof that this monster could deliver? Well, how about the synthesized bass line to the song Superstition? Yeah, that came from Tonto. But it wasn't just the fact that, Stevie finally was playing, most of the instruments, and that he had access to absolutely the most cutting-edge synthesizer known to man. But it's the songs. I've said this before, haven't I, folks? It's always in the songs. Melodically, these songs were sublime. Harmonically, even genius. But it's the lyrics, folks. that really sets this album up as a classic album, if not a classic rock album. And that's what I want to talk about next. I do consider Stevie Wonder's INNERVISIONS a classic rock album. I bought it the second it came out. I absolutely adored it. And I spent most of my time listening to Led Zeppelin at that time. And when I could find the time, Beatles songs, Beatle albums and everything. But I had worn those Beatle albums out. And you know what? Led Zeppelin just sounded so fresh. But as equally played as, say, Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy, Yes's magnificent Close to the Edge album, was Stevie Wonder's INNERVISIONS. And the reason was it connected so well with those albums that I was listening to. There was a magnificence on all of those albums. And, it was like gold. It had a sparkle to it. And some of the lyrics were so damned universal. And here's my whole point. It had something very social to say, didn't it? It was covering now and happening things. And it was not just a protest. See, now we're going to get back to the material. Think of the melodies. Think of the harmonies. Think of the instrumentation and that wonderful Tonto supplying us with sounds we had never heard, besides Dark Side of the Moon, and even Dark Side of the Moon could not achieve some of these sounds. But when you put all of these things together, isn't that exactly what a classic rock album is? Now, that doesn't mean that INNERVISIONS isn't a classic, I don't know even how to define it, soul, a classic rhythm and blues album. You know what? I know albums that I would put on several lists like that. So I'm quite comfortable with seeing this album as a classic rock album. And what about that incredible title? A title and a concept chosen by none other than a blind man. A blind man has to have an inner vision that he relies on. Daredevil would call it his radar sense, right? But something that was deeper. He had to go in deeper into himself and become aware through that sense, and with the aid of his remaining senses, to see the world in an almost colorful way. And that album cover, I would nominate this in the top 10 album covers in classic rock, if you ask me. But think of this. Now, if a blind man is capable of tapping into his inner vision, does that mean that we as sighted people are handicapped and not able to do so? No. See, that's the whole thing of this album. It's a challenge. So not only is it a protest album, it's a challenge to humanity. This is where the album became art. Just like the greatest Led Zeppelin albums, just like the greatest Beatle albums. And what about the Beatle and Stevie Wonder connection? Paul and Stevie. Let's add another Paul in there. Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, and Stevie Wonder came out of the 60s and had continued in even greater successes in some cases than they had in the 60s. It seemed like every damn time I turned on a radio, I was listening either to a Paul McCartney and Wings song, or I was listening to a Paul Simon, without Garfunkel, song after, hit after hit after hit, or I'd be listening to Stevie Wonder. And these three artists are my favorite singer-songwriters from the 70s. But what was the challenge of this album? I said it's an album and a challenge. It's a challenge to humanity to wake up and see through their inner visions what they would like to see, and do it with a positivity. There's that melody we were talking about, right? And to do it with an open mind. There's that Tonto. Took an open mind to even use that damn monster, right? Okay? And it means so much more than any individual track on this album. As for the question, does it sound as fresh today as it did then? I don't know. You know, I listen to this album as often as I listen to Led Zeppelin and as often as I listen to anything from the classic rock era. So it never lost its sizzle for me. It's nothing. It's not an album, folks, that I put away for 10 years and brought it back. I've done that with albums, right? But it's always just kind of been one of the ones that I go to. And when I'm in a real spiritual mood, like on a walk, I love to walk, folks, I put on my headphones and I'll listen to Inner Visions from track 1 to track end.